gonna let my love light shine. I'm gonna let it shine in a special way. I can make you happy if you just say so. I can give you love and joy. Baby, just hold me close. Oh, let me, baby, let me be your Christmas.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your host, Ivan Aguirre. Welcome to Radio Soundwaves, or Red Soundwaves, or Morning News with Ivan Aguirre. It is now 10:05, February 13, Wednesday, with a warm 72 degrees out there in St. Louis, Missouri. Welcome to the show where we try to talk a little bit critically about world events, world happenings, world news. Local news also. We have some local news prepared for you today. Today, given that most of the news today, we tend to variate program by program depending on what's going on. It's not good to have just a very closed focus on exclusively local or exclusively world or exclusively politics. So here we variate a little bit. I mean, it's 1 hour a week. There's not much we can do. We invite all of you to look for news, to look for more news, to look for more interesting events, happenings, facts, whatever you think is worth talking about, discussing, sharing. We invite you to share with us on our Facebook page, Red Soundwaves, or our Tumblr page, redsoundwaves.tumblr.com, or you can shoot us an email at Ivan, that's IVAN, at go.wustl.edu. That's Ivan, IVAN, at go.wustl.edu, or you can call us at 314-935-KWER. That's 314-935-5987. We'll be very happy to receive your call, to receive your emails, to answer you, to promote communication, to promote talking about what's going on in our world, the best way to figure out what's going on and to see the different sides of something, of an event, of reality, to try to understand reality in a better way is through talking to each other. And in that sense, we're listening right now to a very interesting group called I have no idea how to pronounce it. Brats, BRATSCH. Any word that has four consonants that has four letters, non-vowels together, it just confuses me. Brats. It's a French-based music ensemble. It's very influenced by gypsy, Roma music, by klezmer, by jazz, and many different folk traditions. And given that today we're going to be talking a lot about the world and what's happening around the world, I thought it was a good soundtrack for what we're going to be doing right now this hour. So to start diving into what we have prepared for you today. We're gonna have a little bit of let's start off with the U.S. with local U.S. Oh, let's start off local, extremely local. In extremely local news, some of you may find this highly interesting. In extremely local news, a senator. I lost the news right now. Not a senator, a Republican. Give me a moment. Well, in close, but not local news, an Indiana teacher wants. The headline from the Raw story reads, an Indiana teacher wants straight prom because LGBT people have, quote unquote, no purpose. The teacher, a special education teacher from Sullivan, Indiana, whose name is Diana Medley, is joining a group of students, parents, and other Christians in the community who are calling for a prom that bans LGBT people because she says they have no purpose in life, quote unquote. Quote, we don't agree with homosexuality. It's offensive to us. The special education teacher told WTWO TV that the group met at the First Christian Church on Sunday. Now, what's interesting about this note, this article, which has already garnered a lot of response from the internet community, or the LGBT community, is that even within the Sullivan community, Christians who the group is reunited under a religious background, and Christians, even within the Christians, there are other points of view. Other points of view. By the time Dan Savage, LGBT columnist Dan Savage, when he heard about this, he called for people to contact the school system over Medley's comments. Savage is, quote unquote, saying, students with learning disabilities have it hard enough without getting stuck with a mentally challenged special ed teacher. Take a good look at the condescending, hateful smirk that spreads across Medley's face when she was asked if gay people have a purpose in life. And then imagine you're a gay kid in special ed in Sullivan and have this hateful bigot as your teacher. That's Dan Savage quoting. And following this, Change.org released a petition asking Northeast Corporation of Sullivan County, the school corporation, to fire Medley, that had almost 800 signatures. And a Facebook page supporting diversity at the Sullivan High School prom also had 955 likes. So this is something that's going on, and it's happening right now. This past week, we had the Mardi Gras celebration here in the United States. However, one of the sad things that happened during the Mardi Gras celebrations was 4 people were shot and 1 critically injured at New Orleans Mardi Gras. This is released from the online news, news page Russia Today, RT. That says 4 people have been shot during Mardi Gras celebrations in the U.S. city of New Orleans, according to the police. 1 male is critically injured and undergoing surgery. The victim, who appears to have been the intended target, was shot 3 times, once in the abdomen, thigh, and pelvic area. The incident occurred outside of a strip club. It was during Mardi Gras celebration, which is big celebration, especially in New Orleans. And, well, we're sad that happened. In local news, before going on, in local news, the state representative Rick Bratton last month introduced a bill that would require that intelligent design and destiny get the same educational treatment and textbook space in Missouri school as the theory of evolution. Brayton insists that this bill has nothing to do with religion. It's all in the name of science. Brayton told the Riverfront Times, the local news, "I am a science enthusiast. I'm a huge science buff. This bill is about testable data in today's world." However, Eric Michael, the education project director at the National Center for Science Education, completely disagrees and says this bill is very idiosyncratic and strange, and there is simply not scientific evidence for intelligence design. The bill, which redefines a couple of terminology, which may seem kind of banal and which may seem a little bit non-important, but really they, especially given that this is something that we are teaching children in schools, schools being the space where children learn how to interact in society. Right now we were talking about the LGBT prom. Right now we're talking about education. Schools are an important part of our society, and if in schools we force or we impose a certain way of thinking onto children who will later grow up to be adults, instead of letting them for themselves explore different options, then we are creating a society that is more and more closed and more non-open to other points of view, or to other or not prepared to receive or to talk to or to live with other points of view. Not necessarily to embrace them or to accept them, but simply to know about their existence and to be able to live cordially with them. In the new Missouri Standard Science Act, promoted by Brayton, for example, a hypothesis is redefined as something that reflects a quote-unquote minority of scientific opinion and is philosophically unpopular. On the other hand, a scientific theory is, quote, an inferred explanation whose components are data, logic, and faith-based philosophy. And on the other hand, destiny is defined as, quote, the events and processes that define the future of the universe, galaxies, stars, our solar system, Earth, plant life, animal life, and the human race. So in other words, destiny is basically life in a certain way, a certain very vague and ambiguous definition. But promoting these kinds of thoughts within schools, especially within schools, can only cause further strife, further internal strife within our societies, and we cannot have that anymore. Going on, a big news of event this past week has been the manhunt and the big problem with Chris Dorner, the former LAPD officer. Now, I'm not going to go into all his story. A lot has happened in the past week. It's a lot more. It's very complicated, especially the treatment the media has been doing on it, the different audio clippings, the different statements released by Dorner, by other former LAPD officers, by the LAPD itself, by witnesses. It's all very complicated. However, it is something that we think should be talking about, and as such, on our webpage, Red Sound Waves, I highly recommend you go online. On our webpage, we shared just two not necessarily stories, more articles or columns, talking about or reflecting upon events that sprung up from the manhunt of Chris Dorner, and one of them is written by Joshua Holland, published on Alternet. And Joshua Holland is he was a journalist in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he writes this column saying how what happened, or what has happened during the Chris Dorner manhunt has scary flashes of Iraq and Afghanistan wars. He says, I'm quoting from his article, he says, on Thursday, police hunting for Chris Dorner, a veteran and former LAPD officer who allegedly launched a killing spree on Sunday, opened fire on a blue pickup truck driving without its headlights in the early morning hours. Two short Latina women delivering newspapers, 71-year-old Emma Hernandez and her 47-year-old daughter Margie Carranza, were hit in the hail of gunfire. Hernandez was shot twice in the back and is in intensive care as of this writing. Officers also opened fire on a black pickup truck. Fortunately, the innocent driver wasn't hit in that shooting. This is something that happens as the author very correctly points it out, as Joshua Holland very correctly points it out, this is something that happens usually in a war zone, or in a war situation, and it's something that's happening right now here in America, in the West, in a supposedly peaceful and civilized society. And in this sense, we are seeing more and more, we have more media coverage, but we're also seeing more and more certain events that are happening. This is one case, the sad death recently of I forget his name, the best sniper in U.S. history. I forget his name. Kyle. I forget his name right now, but the sniper that was shot in Texas last week also, it's also a symptom of things that are happening in American society and also in Western society that are not necessarily creating a more peaceful, more understanding, or better world. Statistics have shown that since in the United States, since the military operations begun in 2001 in Iraq, Afghanistan, over 130 military personnel have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, which is very, it's very serious. And it's important to think of it not only. It's important to think of it as it's a phenomenon that happened in the United States also during the Vietnam or after the Vietnam War. It's an effect of war, and war has effects not only on the foreign soil, given in the American history. It has effects not only on foreign soil where it is carried out, but also on domestic citizens, on domestic soldiers that come back and have a very, very troubled life. Besides that, over 253,000 American military personnel have suffered craniocephalic traumas. Over 800 war veterans from Iraq and over 700 war veterans from Afghanistan have some sort of amputation. And I'm saying just now all these numbers, but I want to point out beyond the numbers themselves to the fact that we cannot simply consider these men. It's perfectly okay to do so, but we cannot simply consider these men as heroes. We must also consider them as victims. They are also victims of a series of events that must be talked about, not in the discourse of liberty or freedom or democracy, but also in the discourse of real life social, political, and economic impacts. Social in the sense of these men leading troublesome lives, sometimes taking other men with them. Like, for example, Kyle that was shot by, he was helping other men with post-traumatic stress disorder, and he was shot by one of them. That's sort of those social implications, the political implications of veering one way or the other in a political spectrum, and the economic aspects of economic exploitation of these foreign soils, or the economic exploitation of the men themselves. Last week, also a very important piece of news was that the man who killed Osama bin Laden, the Navy SEAL who killed Osama bin Laden, is now destitute. This is also on our webpage, Red Soundwaves, but it's also a piece of news. But now he has no pension, no health care for his wife and kids, no protection for himself and his family, no job. And his body has scar tissue, arthritis, tendonitis, eye damage, blown discs. He has very serious problems, and if the war on terror was the main target of the war on terror was Osama bin Laden, this man is the biggest hero. Given that nowadays it is more technology than individual men that win wars, but still, this man is a hero, and he is not being recognized as such. So these are also victims. The point I want to get to is these are also victims of a series of events that have to be talked about beyond a discourse, and we have to talk about the real life effects and what is going on. And if we want as societies to keep going on and keep doing this, keep carrying on with these events, with these strategies, with this way of living, with all that is implied, with all the exploitation and the dependence on fossil fuel resources and the need to go after them, etc., etc., etc. If we really want to go and keep on doing that, then we have to accept that these are the consequences that will be there. And just to end this part of the U.S., I want to recommend also shared on our webpage, Red Soundwaves, an article published on Alternet by David Sirota, originally published in Salon. And the title of the article is, "Are we living in a police state? Are we living in a police state?" Police state is no longer a hyperbolic term, nor should it imply some fictional fantasy world. It is already here. And David Sirota in the article talks about how there are certain cities in the United States, he talks mostly about Denver, that have already the idea of a police state. The police state, I'm going to just read the final end of his article because it's something very interesting. I don't want to go into it right now. I don't want to take up too much time. But it's something very interesting to consider how our world has changed, and how, especially in the recent years in U.S. history, how the police, since the beginning of the Occupy movement, for example, just to name a date, to right now, how much the police has come up as a very important member of society, as a very active member of society, and as a member of society that characterizes itself for complete and total imposition of its own values onto social values. The manhunt of Chris Dorner in California is a recent example. I can also think about in Occupy Wall Street, the famous mace spraying police. In New York, the different police officers. In Colorado, also in Denver, there's David Sirota is talking about how much the police have an impact, and it's something that's going on, that's happening, and we also have to stop and consider, and we also have to think how how to change that, how to improve that, how to, if we are in a police state, how to not be in a police state, or how to modify the police in order to have a better society at least. And Sirota ends his article saying, the police state, quote, is already here, and it operates in an insipid way whereby its worst atrocities are deftly normalized by power-crazed politicians and power-worshipping media outlets. In that, it is less 1984 than Brave New World, less blatantly horrific than subtly pernicious. Either way, the result is the same. A police state that turns the word liberty into a meaningless political slogan, and not much more. And this, end of quote, and this final sentence of comparing it is less 1984 and more Brave New World is very interesting, because also the police state, or the state that we live in, we talked last week about the Super Bowl and how the Super Bowl ads and how Super Bowl advertising, whether we want it or not, also affects and also models and also has an impact on the way we think and the way we see reality, the way we conceive and the limits of what we can imagine. And in that sense, Brave New World is a little bit more closer to our what's going on right now, because we are not pushed to, for example, question why police should be a certain way. Now, I'm not saying we should eliminate police. No. But the radicalization of discourses right now, we have, which is what I really liked about this article of David Sirota. He's talking about now not necessarily eliminating police, but more talking about what needs to be changed, what needs to be changed in order to create a better, healthier social fabric where all of us can coexist in a certain way. Very complex. I highly invite all of you to talk, to send us messages on Red Sound Waves on Facebook, on our Tumblr page, redsoundwaves.tumblr.com, or call us at 314-935-5987. We'll be very happy to receive your call and carry on this conversation. We're going to take a short break right now. It's 10:30. You're listening to K-Word Clayton 90.5, and we're going to listen to, before jumping into world news, we're going to listen to a song from the world.
Brotando, sabrías que existe el amor, trayendo rocío en el alba, devuelven al sol su color. Quisiera que escuches al viento tocando con su diapasón, y vieras entonces los sueños, el árbol y aquel corazón. Esta es la canción que trae sueños, son del corazón mis recuerdos. Cántala también tú conmigo, y tu sol saldrá, lo verás. Quisiera que vieras la luna quedarse aquí sobre el mar, y entonces te vieras conmigo temblando. Allí en la sal Yo canto soñando el amor. Cuidado, no intenten callarme el mundo. Ya se despertó.
That was a song Si Vieras by the group La Chicana. Very, very nice song. The band has actually a very, very nice album. We're listening now to Lasa, this multicultural singer, on her album La Llorona, just as a soundtrack, just to be listening to something on the background. Because now we're going to jump into world news. And to start off with, I want to talk a little bit about Aaron Swartz. The New York magazine just published an article written by Wesley Yang titled "The Life and Afterlife of Aaron Swartz." The precocious coder, hacker visionary, and pirate, quote unquote, was already a tech legend by the time he turned 17. But in the weeks since his suicide last month, at 26, his friends and comrades have tried to turn him into something else, a martyr. Now, I highly invite all of you to read this very interesting article. But because it presents, Aaron Swartz was he was very important in the internet world. By the time he was 17, he had already secured a permanent legacy written in code. Here I'm quoting from Yang. When he was 13, he was co-authoring a version of RSS. In his later teens, he later helped build and sell Reddit. He was one of the creators of Reddit. He created the coding backbone of the Creative Commons licenses that allow artists and writers to claim or waive certain rights. To coin the coin of the realm for a growing community of progressive activists known as the copyleft movement, devoted to building an economy of culture based on sharing, where instead of copyrights and enclosing yourself and protecting yourself and not allowing anybody else to see or to share your work, the point is to share it, to recognize the producer and to recognize who did the work behind it, but also to share it, what uses its knowledge or music or a movie or whatever, if nobody reads it or listens to it or uses it. The point is to share. And in that sense, Schwartz is I don't think he's very complicated, but personally I don't think it's very complicated, but the way media and different groups and organizations have taken his figure is turning into something very complicated. However, I think it's important to learn and to read different aspects of Schwartz himself. He also allegedly hacked into a JSTOR database while studying at MIT, and he released information. JSTOR later dropped the charges. He was still prosecuted, and because of this prosecution, he took his life a couple of weeks ago. Very, very sad. Very, very sad, especially given the highly potential creative mind he had. But I highly invite all of you to read the article. It's really not that. It really doesn't have a lot of news, but it's a good article to see how complicated sometimes it can be to take a person, a very gifted and a very useful person for society, and turn him into a martyr or turn him into a felon. It's the line that separates both of them. It's very very, very thin. very thin. Going abroad from there, I want to talk a little bit also about the globalized world we live in a non-optimistic sense, we could say, or the globalized world we live in a and how that those connections and that globality affects people beyond this happy, oh, we're all connected point of view. The raw story published, which was originally published by the Agence France Presse, a story titled "Afghanistan's Growing Number of Children Drug Addicts," and it's very it's a very strong article. I highly recommend all of you to read it. It's talking about recovering drug addicts ages 3 to 12 that represent a growing proportion of drug users in war-torn Afghanistan. Now, right now when I say globalized, Afghanistan is one of the leading producers of opium and opiates. However, given that it is one of the place where the resource comes from, we must also consider who is affected by that. And in that sense, for example, the same thing happens in Latin America, where I don't want to talk about that much, but the same thing happens in Latin America, where certain drugs are produced and then exported, and that affects the social fabric very differently than it affects the place where they are consumed, or where they are consumed, just the so-called first world, the West. However, in Afghanistan, the country that produces 90% of the world's opium used to make heroin, the drug that is being produced is something very, very, very dangerous. It's something very useful for medical purposes, but it's also something very, very dangerous. And the article talks about how the drugs, the opium and derivatives of opium are used by the population as just medicine, used to treat anything from diarrhea, constipation, headaches. All those are being used because opium is easily available, and people don't think about it as a drug addiction. It's sleeping pills can be mixed with milk for kids. Children can be given a highly addictive broth made from opium as a remedy for flu or stomach aches. And all this is happening, and the root cause of it, yes, is poverty, but the root cause also is the demand for drugs by the Western world, by these developed countries, and the supply is forced to be made in this isolated, very poor country, instead of it being made in a very controlled and safe environment. If it has to be, if the demand is going to be there, if people are going to want, drugs, then why take down whole populations and inflict the drug problem on whole other populations, countries far, far away? That's something that also has to be compared and has to be talked about, I think. Talked about, especially because in Afghanistan it's children, and children will grow up and become the country itself. So it's something that we have to talk about. So sad that this week we have mainly sad news, because now we're going into a little bit harder stuff. In Mexico, I talked a couple of weeks ago about how the Subcomandante Marcos and the Zapatistas arose once more and started appearing on the political scene and started talking about the Mexican newspaper La Jornada. So I'm sorry for you, but now it's in Spanish. published an article saying Marcos uncovered the truth behind the cybernetic arsenal of the Zapatistas, and in a very interesting twist, Marcos is talking about how, well, people think that we have a lot of technology and information, and he says, well, no, I mean, we've been plowing the earth with plows, with ox, and no, we used to have a huge computer, version 2 point minus 01, and he's talking about how, well, we really don't have it, but what happened, he's telling the history, and he says a young student in Texas, we don't know who, but a young student in Texas created a web page and titled it EZLN, which is Ejército Zapatista de Liberación Nacional, and he started uploading the communique, the letters, the public articles, journal articles, pictures, etc., 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 and more people started collaborating, and it kind of snowballed, and it was all created by a young student in Texas who even the Zapatistas have no idea who it is. And in that idea, Marcos says it could have been, he could have done it, he could have not done it, and he says, I want to thank that person. I want to thank whoever it is. Maybe he's still out there. Maybe he's still out there. Maybe he's a normal person. Maybe he's despised. Whoever he is. Thank you very much. Because of that, well, not because of that, but here we used to have, not here in Chiapas, we used to have ignorance, schools where there was only ignorance. There was undignified food. There was the only medicine for pain was death. But that being launched into cyberspace by this anonymous web page and the page designer, page creator, has helped us out and has put us in communication. And Marcos confirms his trust in free media and in groups, persons, collectives, organizations who have their own way of communication. And in this sense, that's why I wanted to talk, it's probably the happiest article I have today, talk about how other ways of connecting can be created. And this is an example of how that could happen. And I'm going to go a little bit about environmental and close with Spain, because Spain is something that is happening, very, very important thing that is happening right now. I don't know how much of my listeners out there have drunk Fiji water ever, but Fiji water, in an article published by Mother Jones, written by Anna Lenzer, in the September-October 2009 issue, True, but it's something that's still going on right now. Fiji water is something that is a big hit right now. Obama sips it, Paris Hilton loves it, Mary J. Blige won't sing without it, And it's really interesting to think, how did a plastic water bottle imported from a military dictatorship, because we cannot forget Fiji is a military dictatorship, thousands of miles away, becomes the epitome of cool. And right now we were talking about Afghanistan and the production of opium in Afghanistan, and the consumption of that opium in the Western world. It's very important to think right now of how the Fiji water produces a consumer product that is consumed in the Western developed world, and how that happens. The article narrates how the author was in an internet cafe in the Fijian capital of Suva, and then she was suddenly taken by the police, interrogated, because she was probably writing against Fiji water, which is a very important product of the island. And the article talks about how Fiji water has been transformed by the media, by publicity into this very unique consumer product, how artists and singers and politicians, etc., use it and drink it and put it on screen, and then have affect people. The interesting thing also is that Fiji water is owned by U.S. By a U.S. couple, and how all that affects each other. The article is very complex. It presents a lot of different sides to the issue, and I highly recommend you read it. I don't have time right now to go into it. Finally, I want to have you listen to this very short clip recorded by Jonathan Pearl. Jonathan Pearl is City College of New York musicologist, and he was asked by climatologist Marco Tedesco to translate data records of Greenland's melting ice into sound. That is, to take data record of how the ice has been melting in Greenland in the past years, graphs and statistics and information, and transform it into sound. And I just want to have you listen to it right now for a little bit.
My name is Jonathan Pearl. I'm a professor in the Masonic Arts Center, which is a program for music and technology here at City College. A sonification is a way of displaying scientific data using sound rather than a visual representation. So sometimes it could be called an auditory display. A common example that people might recall would be the Geiger counter, which is a device that people use when they're near radiation and want to have something alerting them to how much radiation is happening at that moment, while they are able to keep their eyes on task. What I did is I used the data that Marco provided me from his models and his research relating to the amount of meltwater being produced every year. This one would be the annual albedo measurements. There's 54 measurements. But right now it's playing just a bass choir, and the lower voices disappear when the albedo is low, when there's not a lot of when the ice is not dark, the albedo is high, everything is good, and you hear mostly high voices. And when I bring it now to closer to the 2000s, as the albedo gets lower and lower and darker, you can hear that the lower voices are becoming more and more intense. I have a subharmonic synthesizer and these low bass choir tones that are the lower part of the chord, and they become more and more predominant. It's created and driven by the data itself. Yeah, I'm still kind of grappling with the whole idea of objectivity versus subjectivity, because I was trying to use the data, and I stuck strictly to the rule that only the data would drive the sounds, but I had to make choices all along about how to scale things and how much the software would respond and how kind of sensitivity it would have. And as I was making all these choices, it would have a different effect. I know that it reaches people in a very different way, at a different part of their brain is responding, and you have a relationship to the data over time, because you're listening to 2000, you're listening to 2001. With a graph, your right brain just incorporates 10,000 bits of information in a single associative grab in a single moment. But with sound, you're doing it in time. And so it's like you're being involved in it, you're being carried along with the changes. And so I think it's more visceral and emotional and kind of at a lower level, more primal almost.
And that was a recording by Jonathan Pearl. By Jonathan Pearl, asked by the climatologist Marco Tedesco to translate data records of the melting ice in Greenland. And it's very interesting because that is something that has been going on. There are estimates of water levels rising 60 centimeters and that's in the next years, and that is major. That is a lot of water rising, and something climate change, existing or not. We are experiencing changes in the world right now. We have to consider them, and we have to consider how much we affect. And to end today's broadcast, I have here in the studio with me my at least linguistic compatriot, Iñaki. Sure. Iñaki Gonzalo, and he is from the Basque region in Spain, and he's here to talk a little bit about the huge, I was going to say labor crisis, but it's a big economical crisis in general that's going on in Spain. Since they started the reforms, over 850,000 jobs have been lost. Over 6 million, or around an estimated 6 million people are unemployed. And if you think about it, 6 million people is probably the size of a lot of countries out there. And there are estimates of youth unemployment between 40 and 50%, which is it's a whole stratospheric figures that it's very hard to consider. So Iñaki, what can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I guess that, like from my personal experience, I have friends that did all the university education and had jobs before the hardest part of the crisis started, and then they just were kicked out of the jobs. And they are like they have bachelors in computer science, for example. It's not only in humanities or other kind of careers, and they are just living with the money they have from their partners. Or in this case, I think that the most interesting thing is that family works. Okay, when you have a
crisis, yes.
Yeah, when you have a crisis and you have, let's say, a more conservative society, like all the Southern European countries have, Italy, France, and Spain, basically, you can rely on some other people for this toughest time. And what happens also is that in this first decade of the first century, the crisis, now it's very deep, but has been there from the very beginning of the 21st century. But what happened is that the generation before, like my parents, they got the benefits of the high markets, and so in our generation maybe it's a very tough situation for us, but we can rely on all the money that our parents had because of a beneficial situation. So, and that's how a lot of friends are living now, just because of their partners. They are living with half jobs, so they are living just with one job for two or for a family, or just relying on parents and just waiting for more beneficial situations. So it's an interesting moment, and people, in any way, people are really getting mad. Like,
yes.
It's you can rely on your family, but you don't. That's not the life that you were expecting for yourself.
Exactly. Yes.
And so that really generates a very bad, but also mobilize a little bit the society, and so that's the beneficial part, I guess.
Yes. Because if you think about it, I think it's very hard to imagine, especially for our American listeners. But imagine 50%, 40% of the youth population. Imagine 40% of all the students. Think of it in population terms. 40% of everybody you see around your university, for example, that should have a job are not employed, and will be employed. That is a huge figure, and especially when we start considering how what happens when youth are not employed is either they exit the country and they migrate someplace else to look for a job or for a means of subsistence, or which in that case it deteriorates the economy of the country even more, or they are forced into these, I don't like the word, they're I don't like the word using it, but this is what the discourse says. They are forced into protests, or which is wrong, because it's not that they're protesting, they're manifesting. The correct word would be more like manifestation, because they're manifesting their situation, which is caused by the failure of a system and by the improper remedy for the system, how the budget cuts and the elimination of jobs only leave more people with less opportunities. Instead of creating opportunities, you are slowly taking away opportunities in order to balance an economy. However, who pays in the end? In the end, we have to see the real effects.
¿Cómo se dice malestar?
Unease.
And the bottom line is that there is a huge unease in the in the generations, and so it affects everybody. But again, this has really healthy mindset benefits, because when you are in a very beneficial situation for a society, you don't think about these things, and that was happening in Spain too. So really, Spain has been receiving immigration for the last decade of the 20th century, and we were the country receiving them. Now we are the ones in Spain that have to really get any job, just a job for 3 months. You have to get that job because you don't have any other thing. You have to, as you were saying, you have to migrate. You have to do that. You have to face another very different situation, and so it's really, I mean, you can only, the unease is gonna be there, and so you have to change a lot of things in your mindset. But it has also beneficial situations, I hope, for the midterm.
Yes.
I guess.
Yes. At least it moves us to think about changing the way we organize our
Definitely.
societies. Crisis. The other meaning of the word crisis is also renovation, and it's also improvement. Yeah. And on that kind of hopeful note, we're going to end the program for today. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks,
Thank you
Ivan.
for joining us, Iñaki. We hope we hear more. We invite all of you, I just want to remind all of you, all of our listeners out there, to follow us or to like us on Facebook, on Red Sound Waves. There you can see all the news we share. All the different articles that we share are uploaded there, and you can search for more. And we implore all of the listeners out there to share news with us. If you see something interesting, just send us a link. Drop us an email at Ivan, IVAN, at go.wustl.edu, or follow us also on Tumblr at redsoundwaves.tumblr.com. It is 11 o'clock, Wednesday, February 13th. Remember, stop consumerism for tomorrow. The temperature is 72 degrees, and we hope you have a great middle of the week. Thank you for joining us.